Digital Lost, Chapter 3. She was trying meditation again. It had not helped much before, but this time she felt she was beginning to get a grasp of the process. And as she emptied her mind, this time she had another plan. Sat with her legs crossed, her eyes closed, and her arms stretched out in front of her, resting on an imaginary keyboard, she pictured the computer screen that had disappeared. It was remarkably easy to recall once she had actually tried it, and she imagined clicking on the first small item she could picture, a small desk lamp, and with a small ding, it appeared on the floor next to her. Focusing on it, and touching it with a hand, she then pictured selling it, and as instantly as it had appeared, it vanished. It was a zen feeling that flowed through her, a calmness that she had not felt in days. Gradually, she reached out and sold each oven in turn, cleaning out the house and the outside area, leaving only a stepped tower of them outside along one side of the plot. Once she tidied up, she sat looking at the pile of ovens that remained. The plan was simple. Mount the pile of ovens and try to climb over the barrier, and then from there try to push through the sky and clip out of the game and to see where she could go next. If she was really inside the computer, then maybe she could find the way she got in, or failing that, access something online and get a message out to somebody to come and help her. The roar of a car announced Mortimer's return from work, and she craned around to see the car pulling up in front of the house. Mortimer stepped out of the car in one fluid motion, and then seemed to freeze in mid-step. Twitched violently, he collapsed on the floor, vomiting in the driveway as the work car pulled away behind him. "Mortimer!" His visible distress shocked Alpha, and she leapt to her feet and raced over to his side. "What happened to you?" He sat back, gasping for air, retching again, unable to move. It took Alpha some time with her short frame, but she managed to carry on and drag the twitching Mortimer inside and get the worst of the mess cleaned up for him as he lay on the sofa. "And so you can summon ovens at will now?" It had taken a while for him to recover, and he was draped over the sofa with a glass of water. Alpha held her hand out in the air, and the oven popped into being next to her, with the ring of the purchase complete ding. A moment later, it was gone again. "Not just ovens, I can do this with everything which is available to buy." "Well, my dear, you never cease to surprise." Mortimer smiled weakly. "I'm not really sure how this works though. I think I had glitched the game when I was trying to break over the border around the property." Mortimer's face coloured at the mention of the barrier. He had explained what had happened when he left for work that morning. How, as soon as he had left the plot of land, he was trapped in a black void, unable to move for what felt like forever. Alpha had some ideas of what this actually meant, but there was a deeper implication to consider. When Dexter had been invited over, he had acted in the same way that any My Sims character visiting a neighbour's house would. Mortimer, in comparison, now seemed to be aware of more of the constraints of the game he was in. Being moved to an unloaded location, suddenly realising the reasons of the behaviour of his fellow My Sims, and being able to speak English. More importantly, he was apparently learning more as time went on. It was almost as if Mortimer was now sentient. And for a computer character to be showing signs of sentience was simply unheard of. Alpha wondered how she could bring it up, but decided that it was too big of a subject to get into for now, and she was excited to show Mortimer her plans outside with the physics-defying tower of ovens. With Mortimer looking more himself, she proudly showed off her grand scheme, though she had not been expecting his reaction. Unable to contain himself, Mortimer let out a deep laugh, rolling on and on as he clutched his sides. He gasped. "I had not expected you to gain godlike power, and then to use it to build a ladder. Doing the best I can with the rules of the game, Alpha stamped her foot, caught off guard by his laughter. If you want to stay here, then you don't need to try this, but I need to see if I can break out. He tried to get himself under control, but was having a hard time of it. Look, you don't need to do anything for this. I'm just going to climb up and see what's up there, she said in a huff. Then I shall be your eyes and ears from the ground. As she clambered up the stack of ovens, she did wonder what she would do if she managed to actually get out of here. She had no ideas, but it was important to focus on one step at a time. Moments later, she was on the second highest oven and could feel the thing she had feared to find. There was a solid barrier above her head. Are we stuck? Mortimer called up to her. It seems that way. She failed to keep the disappointment out of her voice. She slapped the sky in frustration, and it rippled in a kaleidoscopic stutter, much to her surprise. This was not something she had expected, and she slapped it again, watching the flickering radiating out from where her hand struck. This was not something she had expected, and she slapped it again, watching the flickering light radiating out from where her hand struck. Back and forward her hand went, testing different areas, looking for any change in the effect. And if she was being honest about it, it just felt good to hit something and let her frustrations out on it. Mortimer's voice cut through the crackle. Alpha? He sounded concerned. You might want to stop that. I can see something strange over the house. He looked over to the house, but couldn't see anything untoward. What do you mean strange? He tried to point in the direction he was looking. Do it again one more time and look there. She obliged, and she watched as the ripples of colour split and cut around a patch of air, as if there was an invisible stone in a rippling pond. Glancing from the fading spot in the air to the house and back again, she put two and two together. That's where I came through in the first place. Scrambling down the ovens, she made her way over to stand with Mortimer and stare up at the patch of sky. Without the ripples, it was invisible though. You mentioned something about falling through a shower originally. Could that be something to do with it? Mortimer was twirling his moustache as he stared into the sky. Alpha blinked. The shower hadn't occurred to her, and yet it was the obvious option now that it had been pointed out to her. She held out her hand and pictured the shower that had been used in her childhood house, and as with the others, it dinged into existence. It was the same shower that she had fallen through into this game from the void originally, every detail the same, including the strange pixelated effect that hung over it. It looks so normal though, Mortimer mused as he walked around it. What makes this special? Moving around it slowly, tapping the glass and metal of it, Alpha thought back to her early days of playing the My Sims game. This was not a normal shower, she realised, as the memory surfaced. It was the first thing she had modified in the game. It had marked the start of her lifelong career of game creation. I think this might not be an original asset in the game, Mortimer. She pointed at the base of the shower, where blades of grass were poking through the shower tray. I think I might have modified this myself, years and years ago, but done something wrong. How do you mean wrong? It still seems like a normal shower as far as I can see. Alpha opened the shower door and pointed. Look at how this grass is sticking through the floor of the shower here. I think if I was to touch this, she swung her hand at the floor, and as before it passed straight through. She had been ready for this, and had steadied herself so she would not overbalance. What she was not ready for was the blurted static and glitching kaleidoscope of colour which spread rapidly all around her, across the lawn and up and over the house. The stack of ovens twitched and popped out of existence in a static crackle of noise. She looked around shocked as the world around her flexed and rippled. Mortimer staggered as the ripples rolled over him and fell to his knees. As the ripples subsided, he clutched his head and groaned. Please, don't do that again. That is one of the worst sensations I have experienced in the last hour. He carefully closed the shower door and stepped away from it. He was loath to experiment with it, given the wild effects it seemed to be having around her, but at the same time it was the biggest clue on how to get out of here. Better get rid of it for now, she thought, and waved it away. Back in the kitchen, she poured a glass of water and took it through to the sitting room. Mortimer was back on the sofa with an ice bag balanced on his head. My dear, I have to say this is possibly the least pleasant day of my life. He took the glass and downed it. Work is now unbearable. I have discovered there is a hole in the sky above my house, and these glitching ripples are quite draining to my mental state. He wiped his mouth with the back of his sleeve, a very uncharacteristic action for someone as refined as Mortimer. Alpha sat opposite him, mirroring the day of her own arrival, sheepishly staring at her own knees. He could see just from Mortimer's mood gem just how everything was affecting him. Instead of its vibrant green tones, it was pulsing a deep orange. I'm sorry, was all she could manage in a small voice. Mortimer sat up, taking the ice bag from his head. Not at all, my dear. I know you're not doing this on purpose, and neither of us can explain what is happening there. That's just the thing, though. I think I can at least guess at it now. She shrank into her seat. After a momentary pause, Mortimer leaned forward. Go on. I think my presence and the modifications I made to the game in the past are causing the game to glitch out. He waved her hand absent-mindedly. And this has to affect everything here. The house, the garden, and even you. And what would happen if this continues? Alpha shrugged. I don't know. It could be nothing, or it could end the game. If you change things enough in a game, it can stop being the game it was originally. End the game? He pressed. That would be a rather serious issue. Maybe, maybe not. Games save their progress. It might just mean we stop until the game loads again. Or worse, I can't say. The conversation felt unfinished, but before they could continue, events decided to take another turn. All around her, the world suddenly froze. Mortimer sat locked in his place, his face mid-sentence. Alpha tried to get up, but it felt like moving through treacle, the air around her feeling more and more solid with each passing moment. Around her, the colours of the world drained out, as if someone had grabbed a cosmic saturation slider and pulled it all the way to the side. And as the moment dragged on, light itself began to fade away. Darkness overtook her. Before she had even been able to stand upright, there was nothing but a black void around her. Mortimer! She tried to cry out, but the words sounded dead and hollow, trapped in her mouth, unable to leave. It was as if she was stuck in an endless abyss, unable to move or breathe, and soon she realized even thinking was becoming harder. There was just the darkness, the empty nothingness dragging on her from all directions. She fought to stay awake, stay conscious as all feeling drained away. She did not know what would happen if she let go, and felt intuitively that if she stopped for even a moment, she would fade away with the rest of the world. Hours passed, uncountable slices of time. The choking abyss dragged at her, pulling all sensation with it. Desperation set in. There was nothing she could do, but loneliness and emptiness gnawed at her. Time began to lose all meaning, and all she could do was repeat over and over to herself, I must stay awake. I am Alpha. I must stay awake.